Geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and The Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and The Geek, presented by Black Stag Brewing, now in a store near you. I am John Bodos, which was daily with me, Aaron Gleeman of the Athletic.
I like that John tried to go high energy and then realized he had no energy and then tried to find a middle ground there.
It's been a journey of a morning, as you know already.
Yeah, John is back from Philadelphia. We are doing this in person. I will note, and the audience, I suppose, can decide their feelings on this on their own. I just present the information to you.
Sure.
What you do with that information is whatever. Our last Friday free show was... We skipped one Friday because John was traveling. Was May 2nd. Now, John left for Philadelphia like shortly after we recorded that morning.
Yes.
That night,
I left during that game.
Right. That night, the Twins played at Fenway against the Red Sox and lost.
Correct.
And then they haven't lost since.
Yeah.
As we're recording this. They play tonight in Milwaukee. We'll see how that goes.
I got back yesterday.
Now
they won while I was getting off the plane.
Right. So technically, they won 11-0. They had an 11 game
to the 8th and 9th inning as I was walking through the airport.
Right. But you were in Philadelphia when the game started. So I'm saying they went 11-0 while you were in Philadelphia. Yes. A lot of people might say, hey, effer, go back to Philadelphia.
Yes, right.
And stay there until after the World Series.
Would you be one of those people?
Well, I just like to call you names, so sure. Yeah, it's interesting. It's been quite a journey, and we're only a quarter of the way through the season, right? Coming up on a third of the way through the season. But it is very similar to last year. I don't know where you were during the 12-game winning streak last year. I think you were in Minnesota.
I don't know, actually.
Who knows? It's actually
it's worth looking up, I suppose.
It's a decent bet on any given day of any given year that you weren't home, so that works. But so last year they start 7-13.
Yeah.
This year they started 7-15.
Right.
Okay. Then
and the amusing thing about this, the whole focus in spring training was not to start slow again.
Right.
Yeah. Let's try and figure out something that we can do here to not start slow, and that did not work.
I feel vindicated because I crapped on that whole idea as it was being talked about during spring training. Because my point was, you can't just will something into existence. It doesn't matter if you talk about it. I talk about losing weight every day of my life.
They try a different plan; it just didn't work.
Sure, yes. Great, same players, same coaches, the different plan, whatever. So 7-13. Now the difference last year, they go 7-13 to start. Then they go 17-3 over their next 20 games, including a 12-game winning streak, which started immediately after the 7-13 start. Okay. This year's slightly different, but it's pretty damn close. It's about as roller coastery similarities as you're going to find in back-to-back seasons for the same team. So they start 7-15. Now they didn't immediately have the 11-game winning streak.
Right.
However, after the 7-15 start, they've gone 17-5, including now the active, as we record this Friday morning, 11-game winning streak. Last year, all of that ended up at 24-16 through 40 games.
Okay.
This year they've played 44 games. They're at 24-20, so they're 4 games worse than they were last year.
Yep.
But extremely similar.
Yeah, right.
Like start horribly for almost a month, 3 or 4 weeks, and then go on an incredible run, which started immediately last year, had a little bit of a lag this year, although the lag this year, they went 6-1 against the White Sox and Angels at home.
Yes.
Then they lose. They have the bad Cleveland series, and then they kick in, and they lose the one in Fenway, like we talked about while you were traveling. I write that off. The anti-jinx hadn't started yet because you were technically at the airport or en route. And then an 11-game winning streak. The other thing that's just weird.
I think we were losing by the time I actually got on the plane last time. So
okay.
And we were ahead when I got off the plane this time.
Let's pause. We'll go to delta.com right now. What I'm going to need you to do is get to Philly before tonight's first pitch, Twins versus Brewers in Milwaukee.
To test this out
and let's
once and for all. Yeah, that's right.
You got the frequent flyer miles. Let's be honest.
That's true.
Does the app even go that high for the number of sky miles you have?
What's the George Clooney movie where he
gets the million up in the air?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah, that's right. 10 Million Mile Club or something like
whatever. I think Michael Russo from The Athletic has whatever that gold They hand you like a 24-karat gold card or something like that. Like, I remember him bragging about that. And I'm like, I don't leave the house, so that doesn't impress me at all. I have a gold couch that I sit on that they awarded me for Fat Boy of the Year, 20 years running. Anyway, the weird thing, though, I mean, first of all, there's only been 6 in the 60-something year history of the Minnesota Twins. There's only been 6 winning streaks of 11 games or more. The longest one was 15 in 1991. Tied for second longest was last year with a couple other seasons at 12. So now that this is, tied for 4th or 5th, this 11 game. Yeah. They've never had a double-digit winning streak in consecutive seasons. And until now, when they've now had 2 of the 6 out of the 6 11-plus game winning streaks in 60-something years, 2 of them have occurred in the last 13 months. Yeah. And both occurred essentially late April, early May, after horrible starts. Yeah. What are the odds of that? I mean, it just seems so strange to me. It's almost like they're just replaying the season. It's almost like they're replaying. You know how someone will try to draw something by memory and it'll look sort of like it, but it'll be a little off. Right. It's like they tried to replay last season by memory. It's like, I remember we were 7 and something, 7 and 15. Oh, last year 7 and 13. Yeah. And then I remember we had a long winning streak, and you end up at basically the same place, which is a decent place to end up, 24 and 20. You tweeted last night or the night, if the season ended now,
they'd be in the postseason.
They'd be in the playoffs. They'd be playing Cleveland. Or no, they'd be playing
the third place team. They'd be playing Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle. In Seattle.
The third best team. Yeah.
Third division winner.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, you've recovered. We talked about this when it was like an 8-game winning streak on the last show. Right. It's not so much that you're now in some sort of driver's seat.
The last show being a Patreon show, by the way, folks.
Yes. We've done 5 episodes in between free shows. Right. So if you want to hear us talk about the Twins more and want to experience this 11-game winning streak, you might be saying, boy, these guys just skipped the whole winning streak. No, we did not. We talked probably 10 hours about 11 games. That's right. Patreon, P-A-T-R-E-O, on patreon.com/Gleeman. We would love to have you join us. I'm starting to notice subscriptions are going up when they win 11 in a row, as opposed to when they've been terrible for 6 months or whatever. But what I was going to say is, and we went into a little more on this on the last Patreon show, so we don't need to rehash the whole thing. But the idea of, they're 24 and 20. This is basically what people would have expected their start to be, kind of based on the over-unders or projections, which had them around, 83 to 87 wins or something. So you're a game or 2 ahead of that, actually, which is remarkable given how they started. You're right now in the 6th out of 6 playoff spots, the last of the 3 wildcard spots. There's 4 different teams within a half game of that or whatever. You're far from kind of in the driver's seat here, but what it's really accomplished, and I say this from a biased standpoint of someone who talks about the Twins with you 3 days a week, it can just be a normal season now. Yeah, right. Like you can move forward in life of 2025 baseball and not say, oh my God, can we dig out of this hole? Or is this guy going to get fired? Is this guy going to get traded?
It's no longer a death march towards the October.
It no longer seems like, I'll put it this way. When people always go, hey, there's still 5 months left, or there's still 120 games left. Yeah. That can be taken multiple ways. That can be taken with, hey, there's still 120 games left, or, oh my God, there's still 120 games left. And believe me, there's been points before the 11-game winning streak when I was like, oh, there's still 125 games left. Right. Now you're at least at the point, and who knows how the season's going to turn out. We saw last year they were in prime playoff position 2/3 of the way through the season, and then 4 weeks later they were dead. That could happen again. It might not. Who knows? But at the very least, you can at least now, you've at least kind of settled in here, and you're not underwater, and you're not drowning, basically, and you can at least look at this team similar to how we viewed them coming into the season, which is a potentially good team, and kind of talk about it as a normal season. And for me, that is a weight off of our shoulders as people who like to talk about this team.
Even better than that is that what we talked about, I think, on Monday on the Patreon is like, ultimately, that 8-game losing streak or winning streak just pulled them out from one of the 3 worst teams in the American League to an average team in the American League. At that time, I think they were still 1 game under 500 or something like that. We were talking about that, right?
Then having the sweep in the Orioles again.
But then you get, now they have got, so there's basically 5, there's being 10 or 15 games above 500, and then being 5 games above 500, 500, 5 below 500, 10, 15 games under 500. They've moved up from the 4th tier to sort of the 2nd tier right now. Like they are at the point where they are a half game behind the Royals and a half game game behind and Cleveland, and have a tie record with the Mariners and are like 1.5 games behind the Yankees. Like there's about 5 teams that are right around the 5 game above 500 mark right now, and we're one of them.
True, and that's good. Yeah, I mean it sounds silly, but for their circumstances certainly. There's a big difference between an 11-game winning streak and an 8-game winning streak.
Right.
Because if they'd have stopped winning at 8, then that means you lost the 9th game, and who knows what you did in the 10th and 11th game, and you might only be 500 now if you do that. But the one monkey wrench in what you're describing, which is true, the hierarchy of the American League, sort of 5 categories or whatever, is that the number 1 team in the American League is unfortunately the Detroit Tigers, who have, they're not lapping the field, but they're out in front, and that changes.
They are not only the best team in the American League, they are tied with the Dodgers for the best team in Major League Baseball right now. That's crazy,
right? And so, yes, the Twins are somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd tier now of the American League, but the benefits of winning the division are further out of their grasp than it might appear.
Sure.
But also, again, there's 118 games left.
Well, and we've seen the Tigers once this year, and nothing about the Tigers struck me as, this is a team that is going to win 100 games this year.
Yeah, although they were the hottest team in the American League the last third of last season too, and then won a playoff series.
That's fair. Well, and that is the next thing I wanted to talk about quickly.
Okay.
Because you started with this narrative about...
Don't even do quickly, John. We have so much time.
So much time to kill. We do have to get some sponsors here eventually.
Quickly.
You start with the narrative how much this season matches last season, or the beginning of this season matches last season. And just 3 weeks ago, our narrative was very different, right? It was how much the beginning of the season it matches the end of last season, right? And what we were talking about a lot over those first 3-4 weeks.
Means last season started horrible and ended horrible. So you can pick your horribleness.
But there was it also means that at some point during the season, it also got we had the same similar kind of win streak as well this season, right? The concern going into late April was, is this team more like it was at the end of last season, or more like it was for the first 4.5 months of last season?
Was it the last third or the first 2/3? Although even that, as we start to parse the beginning, it was really, the beginning quarter and the last quarter of last season were both horrible.
Right.
It was really the middle sort of half of the season. But yeah, your point is and I agree. I mean, that was what we talked about all offseason, especially given their lack of fundamental coaching, managing, front office, and roster changes.
Correct.
They ran it back for the most part. I mean, they added a few guys, but
they had some they had some few hitters, and they changed their hitting coach. So did any of that? But the question was, does any of that make a difference if none of the young guys develop, or if the older guys are just not going to perform, or can't stay healthy, or the team just can't stay healthy?
And the funny thing I would say is, their offense has certainly been better during this 11-game winning streak. It's hard not. I mean, almost all facets of your team will be good during an 11-game winning streak.
Yes, of course.
I mean, we saw that last year with the 12-game winning streak. But the offense has just been sort of good. They're hitting 240 something, 740 OPS or something like that during the streak. Which, I mean, that's a huge improvement over what we saw for the first several weeks of the season. But it's just barely above average overall. The pitching staff during the 11-game winning streak has a 2-something ERA, 2.40 ERA.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's driving it. And the funny thing is...
Yeah, but that was also driving it before they got on the 11-game winning streak. We talked a lot about how the pitching staff's been very good.
But the problem with that is the pitching staff was horrendous during the 7-15 start. They gave up 9 runs once in the first turn, eight runs once.
They were bad for the first
Griffin
week.
Jacks blew 3 different leads during that time.
That is where
their WPA through the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season was, I believe, 28th out of 30 from a pitching standpoint. But you're right. The rotation started getting rolling before the 11-game winning streak. I guess what I'm saying is the questions about the offense, which were the main questions last season, because the offense is what fell apart.
Yep.
The offense hasn't been good this season. And it's been better during the 11-game winning streak because that's how it works during 11-game winning streaks. But it's hardly been great. And for that matter, most of these core guys that we had questions about, I mean,
We
think
still
of
have some questions.
Miranda and Julian are at AAA.
Right.
Royce Lewis missed the first month and is hitting 150 so far and has not looked good at all at the plate, in my opinion. We can talk about some of the veteran guys. Wallner's hurt. I mean, we've seen some good moments from Larnach, but he's hardly been great. He's gotten hotter of late. They've been carried for the most part by Buxton and Bader, who are now potentially both hurt, which we're going to talk a lot about the injury situation because yesterday was just, I almost had to laugh.
Unbelievable.
Well, I was just to stop from crying during the game yesterday. But you should see the text chain between me and Dan because neither of us were in Baltimore, obviously. Yeah. So I texted him and he goes, "Oh God, what? I'm not watching yet." And I was like, "Well, I could tell you, but you're going to think I'm joking."
Yeah, right.
That, there was a $52 million collision in the outfield and they've both been laying on the ground for 5 minutes.
Yes.
But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting place to be. And I think we had similar discussions last year when they won the 12 in a row. It was a little earlier. It was about 2 weeks earlier than it is now. But the difference to me, and I guess this sort of depends a little bit on if you think the Orioles are good or bad. I still think the Orioles are going to end up being pretty good, although honestly, they've gone 0-6 against the Twins. The Twins have really put them in the dirt at this point.
Yeah. I mean, a week and a half ago, Orioles were ahead of the Twins in the standing. The Orioles were sort of in that fourth tier as well. They've fallen down to fifth. They might have been a 500 team last.
10 days ago, my colleague at The Athletic, Jim Bowden, former Cincinnati Reds and Washington Nationals GM, I think, did like 5 trades I'd like to see early in the season, and one of them was the Twins trading Joe Ryan to the Baltimore Orioles for young players.
Right.
And I thought that was sort of implausible or just odd at the time. And now it's like, okay, well, why are the Twins trading anyone at this point? And I get an 11-game winning streak changes
now
everything.
He might be coming out with the opposite.
Yeah,
Here's why the Orioles trade a hitter to the Twins for some young pitching.
Or we can, wait till July and have this conversation not in, May. We could do that too, I guess. We'll take the traffic on the website, I suppose. But I guess the difference, last year's 12-game winning streak, I think 9 of the 12 came against the White Sox, who we knew were horrendous.
Right, yeah.
We didn't realize they were like literally the worst team of all time. And the Angels, who have been horrendous for 10 years now. And it was dismissed as sort of, okay, that proves the Twins aren't the bottom of the AL barrel.
Right.
But it doesn't really prove much. Now, this 11 games started with 2 wins at Fenway, which is always going to be difficult.
Yep.
Then it involved a sweep of the Orioles. Now, at the time, we probably had higher thoughts of the Orioles than what we've seen.
Yep.
A sweep of the Giants, who are a legitimately good team, and then a second sweep of the Orioles in Baltimore. I'm not saying this is, Dodgers, Yankees, and they beat the 27 Yankees or whatever during this streak, but this is a lot higher caliber of competition, particularly if you're like me and you're still kind of clinging to the idea that the Orioles are ultimately going to be at least, a 500-ish team, which I still probably would bet on, but it's getting late early for them, especially the Yankees are running away with that division. But so the question that we had last year at this time, and it's going to repeat itself like all the things that are repeating themselves since early last year. What does this mean? Right. And this team, like you said, you spent all offseason trying to figure out, what version of this team is this? And even through 44 games this season, what version of this team is this? Is it the bad starting team that couldn't hit and had bullpen blowups that wasted so many good starts? Or is it the hottest team in baseball? Yeah. Now, as always, the answer is probably somewhere in between.
Of course.
Although we haven't seen the somewhere in between for 2 years now. They have not played like a 500 stretch, for a month.
Right.
At any point, they've either been terrible at the beginning of last year and the end of last year, and then in the middle, they played like a 95-win team for like 2.5, 3 months. And then we've seen that sort of play out similarly this year. So I'm very curious. They go to Milwaukee now starting tonight for 3, and then they come home, and then they have a 3-series road trip right after that. So, I mean, it's an interesting phase of the schedule, not necessarily because the competition is that hard, but I think some of the scheduling, a 3-series road trip, which is coming up like in a couple weeks, you rarely see that. And I know that because I love 3-series road trips because I get that extra couch time on my golden couch at home.
Tampa, at Seattle, and at Oakland, or at Sacramento, at the Athletics.
It's not even a natural, you're going from Florida to Seattle.
Yeah.
So it's not even like
10 games.
It's not even like you're on the West Coast. Just stay out there and play 3 teams. It's like, no, you'll start in Tampa.
And I didn't recognize they come home. They're facing Cleveland next week. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cleveland and Kansas City. That's a big homestand.
It's a big stretch. They could also just not lose for a while. That would be fine too. I mean,
the truth is that almost everything is just sort of a big stretch right now. And I think that's sort of the takeaway I'm getting from this is that, how valuable are any of the narratives anymore?
Right.
But
that's fine.
Right. That's
Who cares? Let them form their narrative.
Right.
I mean, you need narratives when you don't have other stuff. And the reason we talk about narratives all the time during the off season is because they're not playing games during the off season. So you gotta start chopping up previously played games and stretches and all that. And yeah, when they start 7-15 after collapsing down the stretch last year, it's impossible not to say, well, this looks like an awful lot like the garbage we watched.
Because it's offensive related, right?
And then they turn it around this year, same way, 10-plus game winning streak in late April, early May. And it's like, okay, well, you hope now at this point, because I know people see that and they go, well, how did it end up last year? Well, it ended up terribly last year, but before it ended up terribly, it was great for 3 months.
Right, yeah.
So let's hope they have the great for 3 months period and then don't have the complete collapse at the end period, and they'll make the playoffs if that's the case. Now who knows? I mean, that's the weird part of a double-digit winning streak, and it's doubly weird because we've now experienced it 2 years in a row, which has never happened in Twins history and has rarely happened for any team back-to-back years, and that both of them came after a horrible stretch of losing to begin the season. It really puts pressure on your brain to be like, what does this mean?
Right.
Because let's say they lose 2 out of 3 in Milwaukee. They're now, at that point, a couple games above 500.
2 out of 3 versus Cleveland.
Right. I mean, whatever.
Right. All of that could happen easily.
Right. And so the 11-game winning streak is great in the sense that it saved their season. But, and we'll get into the injuries here, I still have such a high level of concern about their lineup because particularly if they get bad news on Buxton and or Correa and or Bader, who also didn't play yesterday after leaving earlier in the series with a groin injury. And I didn't take it as a great sign that everyone on the team was injured. They were putting in all the bench guys, and Buxton came out, and Bader didn't come into that game.
Yeah, I know.
Suggests to me that his groin injury is probably not great.
Yep.
We'll see. They haven't placed him on the IL yet, but we'll see tonight, I guess, in Milwaukee. But it seems weird to react to an 11-game winning streak and say, okay, now you prove this is for real. But the extreme up and down roller coaster, whatever cliche you want to use, nature of what we've seen from them, not just this season, but last season too, they have a lot to prove just in terms of, I think 24-20 is representative of like my expectation for them kind of coming into this thing.
Yeah, of course.
Plus or minus.
As well as Vegas's expectation.
Right. But the fact that they didn't really play like a 24-20 team at any point, they either played like the worst team in the league or the best team in the league, and that's the same as last year.
The team has been a Jekyll and Hyde thing for the last year and a half now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
There needs to be a new, like, good and bad, because Jekyll and Hyde's like hundreds of years old, right? Like that's an old.
Yeah,
we need a new. This is like when I make Seinfeld references and people go, "What's that?" And I'm like, "It's this show from 35
I think
years."
Jekyll and Hyde is
evergreen
enough. I think
is that what you're saying?
It was a fairly popular musical within the last 20 years.
All right, them and Frankenstein's Monster. Those are evergreen.
That's it for now.
Here's how you know you're talking to a pretentious person. And let me say this as someone who's that. When you go, oh, it's a real Frankenstein, and they go, no, you mean Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein was the doctor. You like how I acted pretentious, but spun it in a way that I was warning you about the potential?
Sure.
I was said something about Frankenstein and had someone correct me on that, and I've never recovered from it, really. So I'm trying to spread the word so you can't be embarrassed like I was. Before we talk about, unfortunately, the latest batch of potentially serious injuries that the Twins have suffered,
yes,
let's talk about our first couple of sponsors, including our presenting sponsor,
Black Stack Brewing, which we definitely have to get you out there because Cooper wants to hang out with you. I think
We charge extra for that.
Did you meet him at the Winter Meltdown? I don't think you did.
I met many people at the Winter Meltdown.
But you guys have some sort of you have some TV show or something you both like. What is the TV show that you both like? Where he wants you to name beers for him.
I think You Should Leave is a great show.
He runs a great brewery. It's a great show. He runs a great brewery, and now you can find that great brewery's great beer all over Greater Minnesota. From Grand Marais to Rochester, Winona to Fargo, they have a new distributor, and so you can go into your local liquor store and ask for Black Stack Brewing. I gotta tell you, it is made for summer stuff. They do have a couple of really good stouts that I would suggest in the winter, but I think their top stuff is more summer beer drinking, particularly local 755 New England IPA or the Slopes French Pilsner, Pull Tabs Pale Ale, and then they've also got a great sour as well. So go check them out at your local liquor store. Go ask for them at your local liquor store, or stop by Blacksback Brewing. That's right near 94 and 280. We had our opening day party there. It was fantastic. Again, or ask for them at your local liquor store.
Next one. Factor. Factor meals. John always likes this when he comes back from a trip to have these waiting in the fridge.
I screwed up this time. I did not have Factor. I didn't think about it.
Yeah, it's theater of the mind, John. You don't have to tell people that.
Yeah. I'm without Chrissy for 4 days. I would love to be able to pop some Factor meals right in the microwave. So
here's how Factor meals work. You pick from a huge menu of not only different items, but like what you're going for. Do you want low calorie? Do you want high protein? Do you want vegetarian? Do you want kid friendly? Whatever it is, they send you the meals, and we've both tried this.
Yes.
And they're super easy to make, which I value quite a bit.
Buttered chicken, so good.
And they're actually good. And if you so choose, they're good for you too.
Right.
Delivered right to your door. Menu changes every week. You pick and choose what you want.
Yeah.
And
it's like a life hack.
Yeah, super quick meals, but healthy. You feel like you're actually like eating real food when you eat it.
And you can get started at factormeals.com/Gleeman50 off. So it's Gleeman50 OFF, and use code Gleeman50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code Gleeman50 off at factormeals.com/Gleeman50 OFF for 50% off plus free shipping.
Okay. We really need these sponsors to come up with longer and more complicated
promo codes.
One request.
I was like, it is a really long promo code, but when it's for 50% off.
Yeah, they make you.
I can actually do the extra 5. I can do the extra 5 things there. 50 OFF.
Okay. It'd be like if we were like, and you can check out the podcast at Gleeman and The Geek baseball podcast about the Twins.com. It's like, well, you guys want to just choose it? Anyway. All right, let's unfortunately talk about the injuries here. I think that, we talked about the 11-game winning streak, which it is weird to talk about it because it could be over at any time. It could go 1,000 games. Who knows? They could never lose again, which is going to be good for the show, I think, if that happens. We might get sick of it. Sick of all the winning. Let's find out.
Yeah, usually that happens in Minnesota sports.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've only experienced winning in the last week, so 2 weeks.
You have? Yeah.
Really?
That's right. Minnesota Lynx, we're going to try and keep it going tonight.
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, they're the number one winning team in Minnesota over the last 20 years since they've existed, basically. Here's the injury situation, and obviously they're going to have significantly more information available to this tonight in Milwaukee.
Right.
I'd say starting 3 or 4 o'clock Central Time, you'll start to see some reporters there, including Dan Hayes of The Athletic, will start to pass along the actual information about this. But, I mean, anybody watching the game, you saw yesterday in Baltimore, they win, 4-0, I think it was, to extend the streak to 11. Unfortunately, you win the battle, you maybe lose the war during that because Byron Buxton...
Might have lost several war during that.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. Oh, boy. All right, for you, that wasn't bad.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
They're coming with the dad joke occasionally.
Correa's got negative war anyway. Correa goes out. There's a ball between, right behind second base. Correa's backpedaling to go potentially catch it. Buxton sprinting in to potentially catch it. It looked to me like what was supposed to happen did happen almost, which is that the outfielder ultimately called it. Correa
tried to get out of the way.
At the last minute, couldn't quite veer off because it was so last minute, but he kind of tried to just stop and brace himself.
Right.
He looked like I don't know, like how I imagine a crash test dummy would look if they were human, about to brace for impact, basically. And unfortunately, well, first of all, Buxton caught it and hung on to it, despite slamming, looked like kind of chin first, into Correa's back or shoulder, and they both went down like a ton of bricks. And Correa, what seemed like not moving. Initially, he stayed like Buxton was clearly in pain, and head and neck and whatever hurt. And given both of their histories, but especially Buxton's history with collisions and stuff, you think the worst. We'll see. But Correa looked like I don't know if he was unconscious.
He just needed a minute.
Or, there's what's called a fencing reaction, which is when people have not fencing like or maybe it is. I don't know. When people have a concussion or brain injury, your body sort of puts your hands forward, like out of. Now, I'm not saying he had a traumatic brain injury, but they're both on the concussion protocol, and we'll be going through testing with that. It certainly was a bigger collision than you're used to seeing in baseball, and there's a fair number of collisions in baseball. But this was basically two guys almost full speed into each other, and Correa leaves the game immediately, and it looked like his shoulder took the brunt of it, because Buxton's head basically ran into his shoulder. He leaves, doesn't stay in. Buxton stays in, but as we've commonly see with the Twins in injuries.
With Rocco,
and I'm not saying this is a criticism. I think this is sort of logical. If a guy gets hurt playing defense and thinks they're able to stay in the game, they will often stay in the game, and then once that half inning is over and you go back to the dugout, and let's say you're not batting in that inning, so you just sit there for 5 or 10 minutes, that gives the training staff time to look you over. That gives your body time to dump some of that adrenaline, and then you kind of find out how you actually feel, maybe. Like, oh, this is killing me, or my head's killing me, or whatever it is. And so he didn't come back out. And like I said, Bader didn't replace him in center field. They shifted all the defense around. It was a very odd defensive alignment to get Deshaun Kersey ended up playing center field. So they're both...
But he had to move from left field, so Castro had to move to second base.
Very strange.
Clemens had to move to second base. So.
They're both in the concussion protocol. That doesn't necessarily mean they have a concussion. But certainly with that collision, it wouldn't surprise me. So I don't know. I think the early feeling was that Buxton was in better shape from it than Correa.
He stayed in the game, so that would follow.
But who knows? I mean, it seems a little pointless to speculate too much about it when we're going to find out one way or the other 5 hours from now or whatever it is. So I don't know. It looked bad. I mean, obviously that's a play you don't want to have happen. It shouldn't happen. Like, I'm not saying either of them individually did something wrong, but the entire sort of protocol for calling off other fielders and is to not have that happen. It is remarkable that Buxton not only caught it, but hung on to the ball.
Yeah, that's it too.
Although that is kind of a very Buxton sort of thing. He will run through a wall or a shortstop or whatever he needs to run through to catch the ball. I
thought the same thing about Bader slamming into the left field wall.
Yeah, but that's not where he got hurt.
Oh, that's not what it was.
He hurt his groin.
Oh, I thought
it wasn't the knee. I agree. That looked bad, and he seemed shaken up from it. And we talked an episode or two ago about like watching him for the last 6 weeks.
I just assumed that also did something to do with the groin.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. But I think that was the knee that hit the wall. But it's very easy to see why Harrison Bader's been hurt throughout his career.
Yes.
And, you can say the same thing about Buxton, obviously.
Sure.
There are some guys who they get hurt not because of the style of their play, but, you just get hit by a pitch or whatever it is. I think Royce Lewis has not really gotten hurt because of the style of his play necessarily. He just gets hurt. With Buxton, especially early in his career, he often got hurt because of the, extreme, run through a wall, speed, diving nature. Watching Bader, and it's, for the good of the team. I mean, it was amazing effort on that play. But we've seen like 4 or 5 of those where he doesn't care what happens to his body in the moment. And maybe that's why he gets along so well with Buxton, because they got a club there, I guess.
Yes, that's right.
The run fast, catch everything, don't care about your body club.
Yeah.
It's got 2 members in it.
Yeah, I don't like that club.
Yeah, well, you like it right until you don't like it.
Right,
You know what I
that's
mean?
right,
Bader's been great, especially defensively. Buxton, same thing. But yeah, they're in a tough spot here if one or more of these prove to need an IL stand.
Right, yeah.
We've seen, especially with concussions, the Twins have
Right, yeah, for
experienced
sure.
this more so than as much as any team in baseball.
Between Morneau and Span.
Mauer,
Yeah.
Morneau, Span,
Yeah.
Koski right after
Right,
he left
yeah,
the Twins. We're forgetting a bunch here. There's been a ton. And the thing that, and unfortunately we learned this the hard way because, Mauer and Morneau were some of the earlier, what I would say, this era of how people view concussions. They were kind of at the beginning of that. And we saw the reaction because a concussion is not something you can see.
Right.
It's not, a bone protruding or a black.
You don't get to wear a cast.
Right.
Right.
It's a brain injury, and your brain often doesn't work how you need it to after that. And we've seen Buxton earlier in his career had a concussion at the end of the season, and he tried to play in the playoffs, and he was dizzy and couldn't. He was experiencing flashes of light,
Right.
which is a very common symptom. Mauer had the same thing. And he had to ask out of the playoffs. And so it's one of those things. I always thought it's a mistake when, and I get the terminology when they say like it's a mild concussion. I also think we would probably be better off just in general, or we would create a more understanding fan base across all sports if we just called them brain injuries instead of concussion. Because concussion, it's a little bit like calling it pork. It's a lot easier to eat a pork loin
Than eat a baby pig.
than eat some pig. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier to think in your head, oh, he's just got a concussion, than, oh, he's just got a traumatic brain injury, right? It's the phrasing of it. But it's hard to speculate. I mean, obviously, you hope both of them came out of it okay. At the very least, I'm going to not expect to see them tonight in Milwaukee. But they also have the Bader injury to worry about. Like you mentioned, Wallner's still likely out for the rest of the month with his hamstring injury. Ty France got banged up during the series and had to be pressed into action.
Yeah, but he got pressed back into action when
But I'm going to guess
Buxton
he's
had to
not
leave
at
the
100%. And then we thought briefly that Willie Castro had basically died at second base. It turns out he just knocked the wind out of himself with the worst slide you've ever seen in your life. Like he just belly flopped into second base. He's a very graceful player in general. Great athlete, runs fast, pretty smooth at various positions. And then you just see him belly flop shoulder first into second base, and you just go, what's going on here?
What you do there, man?
Yeah. And then people always blame the training staff. Like they told Willie Castro, show us the worst slide anybody's ever done on a baseball field. Like that's what he's been advised to do. So that's the situation with Buxton and Correa. Bader also up in the air. I don't really know what to say. It's they I guess fortunately, like a very small silver lining in this is that they actually do now have some healthy guys on the 40-man roster from a position player standpoint. Because if you think back 3 or 4 weeks ago when they started losing infielders, when Castro went down and Correa was banged up and everything, the reason Cody Clemens is on the team now and the reason Jonah Bride is on the team now, who are now like important players because they're playing almost every day now, is because they didn't have any healthy position players on the 40-man roster. Miranda was hurt. I'm trying to think who else. Austin Martin was hurt. He's still hurt. Right. But if you look now at the options at AAA, you do have Miranda, who's returned to health.
Okay. He's
only played a few games. He hasn't lit it up or anything. Mickey Gasper, who's been up and down now 2 or 3 times, is hitting like 400 at AAA. Eddie Julian is not hitting well at AAA, but he's playing every day at second base.
He had a good game a few days ago. But
you have Jair Camargo as a third catcher, although that doesn't really help them much. And then you have Emmanuel Rodriguez, who has returned from his thumb injury to hit pretty well over the last several games. Those are your options. Now, I will bring up a non-40-man roster option named Carson McCusker, who is putting up absurd hitting numbers at AAA and is a 6'8", right-handed slugger, corner outfielder, signed out at Indy Ball, has put up good numbers in the past couple years and just having a monster first month plus for the Saints. And I'm not sitting here saying I think Carson McCusker, who's by the way is already 27, he's a late blooming, went undrafted out of college,
Indy
all that
Ball
stuff.
guy, yeah.
I'm not sitting here telling you they got a clear room for him in the lineup for the next 5 years, that he's going to be their cleanup hitter for the next decade. I'm not saying anything like that. But if you look at this roster, which could certainly use some more right-handed power, and you look at this roster in the wake of all these injuries that we're talking about and say we could just use bodies who can do something offensively. At some point here, if a couple of these guys that we've been talking about need to go on the IL, it's more of an active decision at this point not to call up McCusker than it is to call up McCusker.
Yeah, we'll have to see how many of these guys are going on, or even if one goes on the IL,
right?
We're kind of at that point where
if none go on the IL, you could still plug him in at DH, left field, right field as a right-handed batter.
And it also, do they think Erod is, ready right now? I have never gotten that sense from the Twins that they are going to throw a top prospect into something like that if they
did
need
it with
to.
Keishel. They did it with Keishel 3 weeks ago.
Well, that's true. That's true.
He had less high miser experience than Rodriguez.
That's true.
I just think with
another guy who's not available at the 40-man roster because of injuries, by the way. Right?
Yeah. Austin Martin has been available for like 40 hours the whole season, and it's been the exact point they didn't need him, and every point guys have been hurt, he's also been hurt. So he's really lost an opportunity.
Either Bader or Buxton are going on the IL, and the other one just needs a couple days even, which I think is certainly possible. Right. Well, now you got Kersey starting every day in center field. Right, you've got Larnach probably in one of the corner outfield spots. I guess Willie Castro is your other full-time outfielder if you want.
They have coverage because Clemens plays the outfield. We saw not well, but he plays the outfield.
Right. They've had Larnach starting at DH 5 of the last 6 games.
Right. It's not so much that they don't have coverage, because most of the guys on the roster now are there because of their defensive flexibility, not because of their hitting ability. That's what they chose to do with this. Like Kersey can play all 3 outfield spots. Maybe not much of a hitter, although he had a homer.
A big home run.
Yeah. Clemens.
And a big walkout.
Clemens is there because he can play 4 or 5 different positions. Maybe not particularly well. He looked real bad at first base and not great in right field. Jonah Bride, same thing. He's there because he can play all the infield spots. Maybe not particularly well. So, they do have the coverage no matter who's out, but
and if you're calling up any of those guys from AAA, you're calling him up not to be a bench player. Even McCusker. You're not going to call up McCusker and put him on the bench for
who's playing over him? Cody Clemens and Joe DeBride. They don't. They got 3 good hitters healthy at this point. So I just people always bring up, he's not on the 40-man roster. Well, take a good long look at that 40-man roster. There's some people that can be removed or shifted to the 60-day IL to create a spot. So I'm not sitting here expecting them to call up Carson McCusker. I think probably we'd see Gasper again, or we'd see Julian, or we'd see Miranda, or whatever it is. But I just think at some point, regardless of the injuries, you have a 27-year-old guy who's clearly having some level of breakthrough as a late blooming sort of non-traditional career path guy. And he's not just hitting well at AAA. There are a lot of guys hitting well at AAA. He's leading the league in homers. He's hitting 340, and he's a high strikeout guy. He's a big swinger miss guy. I don't think he's going to be the solution long term, but he could be a guy who can pop some homers for you. And who's blocking him at this point, I guess, is mine. But yeah, I would be pleasantly surprised if they called him up, but I think more likely is some of the names already on the 40-man roster. I'd love to see them not have to call up anybody, but we know better at this point. Let's see, there was one other thing, and then we got to talk about an actual rotation change that they made. I think there was one other... I don't know. It's tough because we'd love to talk about injury timelines and who replaces who and who's the best call-up, but until we know, it's just pointless to speculate.
There's just too many. There's too many. There's too many ways this could fall. I don't know how many guys are going to want to be put on the IL. I don't know how many are going to need 2 or 3 days to kind of reevaluate things,
especially a concussion.
Right.
There isn't a diagnosis that you can make. Yes, you get diagnosed with a concussion and they'll say mild or moderate or whatever. But we've seen over the years with many Twins players, unfortunately, Morneau initially thought he'd be back in 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And it ruined his career almost.
Right,
and same thing with Mauer, same thing with everybody. You can't. It's a very difficult thing to predict
to timeline
because it's not a broken bone or a strained whatever. It's your brain.
Do you know if there's still a 7-day specific 7-day IL just for concussions?
Right. Which was in kind of along the lines of what we're talking about. They put that in 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, decade ago, maybe. And the intention was, because what would happen, and the Twins were guilty of this with several concussed players, is you want to think this guy's going to return because his leg's not broken, his elbow's not torn. He's got some sensitivity to light or headaches or dizziness or whatever, but everyone wants to think, take a couple days off and you'll be fine. More often than not, you're not fine. The 7-day IL versus, at the time, a 15-day IL.
And is now 10. That's why I was wondering if it was still around even.
It was put in not because they thought guys return quicker from a concussion.
Right.
They don't. It was put in as like a way to motivate teams to not try to wait it out.
Right.
To just go, all right, the guy's concussed. Maybe he'll be fine in 3 days, but let's just put him on the 7-day IL as is, and he'll come back in a week. It was kind of protecting them from themselves a little bit by saying, let's just shut him down for a week. So we'll see. Before we talk about the actual roster change that they made ahead of the last game,
let's talk about how you are in the sweet spot of sports world right now, and Prize Picks is one of our sponsors. There's something going on every night. Every night there's something great to watch, whether it is a Twins game or whatever other baseball team you're following, or the NBA.
WNBA starting up.
Yeah. How many NBA games are you watching? How many nights per week are you turning on an NBA game these days?
I've watched almost every playoff game, unless I've been at the playoff game in which I can't watch the earlier one.
That is
Sometimes I even look at my phone on that.
And the perfect companion for that is Prize Picks, because you want to be able to kind of speculate on what might happen or what might not happen. And Prize Picks gives you a way to back those predictions up of yours with a little bit of cash, right? All you have to do is download that Prize Picks app, and you go out there and you're going to say, okay, I'm pretty sure this player is going to get
more or
less than whatever they've got there, 16 and a half points.
We've both played it.
Right.
I've played it NBA style.
Yeah. And now with baseball, we've got all kinds of stuff every day.
Super easy. Super easy to play.
You can play for your team. You can play with the other team. You can anything you want to put, any way you want to do it.
And if you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. They have also all kinds of other promotions and stuff. But yeah, like you said, basketball season's going.
Yeah, they often run like these specials, like things are just automatically going to win. So again, just download the app today and use the code Gleeman to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
Download the app today and use the code Gleeman to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Okay, our next sponsor is Game Time.
Yeah.
So you were just looking at Wolves playoff tickets before we started recording, trying to buy some.
Shockingly, we got shut out.
Game Time, the Game Time app, we've both used it. Super easy, but also helpful in that their specialty, they have two specialties. Last minute tickets and hard to find tickets.
Well, both we got
both apply here.
Twins games are last minute, and hard to find ones are more the Wolves game right now. Yep.
The other thing that they offer through the app is they will kind of help you figure out what the best value tickets are.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with the different sections and the different pricing and stuff, they can basically crunch the numbers for you and go, in this price range, you want to be in this section, not that section.
Yeah, you want a get me in ticket, you can give it get me in ticket. Right. If you want, hey, you know what? Maybe I would check out to see what those Champions Clubs are. I'm going to treat myself or take my spouse to a special game that we'll both remember. You use the Game Time app, see what you can get out there.
You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Gleeman. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account on the Game Time app and redeem the code GLEEMAN, Gleeman, for $20 off your first purchase. All right. So amid all the winning and all the injuries in Baltimore was an actual decision, roster change, where they demoted Simeon Woods Richardson.
Yeah.
They haven't named his rotation replacement yet. In the meantime,
is it definitely a rotation replacement? Like this wasn't we just need to have an extra reliever carrying into the extra games and stuff. They're actually they're gonna bring somebody else up for that because he's got to be down 10 days, right?
Well, they need a starter Sunday.
Yes,
because of the doubleheader.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I wondered if because Simeon Woods Richardson worked on Thursday and they had games Friday, Saturday, Sunday, etc., and they had burned through the bullpen completely on Thursday. Was it definitely going to be he's out of the rotation for more than one thing?
Well, they're just you're getting confused by the bullpen aspect. They do this every time. Right. There's no sense in calling up a starter
when you've already got
Thursday when they're not going to start until Sunday.
And since they already had one on the roster. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. You can use Cody Funderburk or whoever. I mean, they always do that. I don't know how long-term this is, but it's certainly performance-based rather than schedule-based or bullpen-based. I mean, yeah, the bullpen was pressed in a doubleheader. Maybe that was the tiebreaker, but Simeon Woods Richardson has been trending in the wrong direction, I would say, since like August of last year, basically, but certainly this year. And I mean, this is what we talked about early in the season with Paddock, when Paddock was kind of everyone's let's wait for him to get kicked out of the rotation guy. And we've been guilty of that too, especially after he gives up 9 runs in his first start after missing the second half of last season. But Paddock has been very good since giving up 9 runs in his first start. He's got a 2-something ERA over his last 7 starts. He's now gone into this, 7 innings, back-to-back starts, 7 shutout against Baltimore yesterday when they needed a break for the bullpen was huge. He's been very, very good now for 6 or 7 starts in a row. Right. Certainly much, much too good to
certainly trending in the right direction the last couple starts, for sure.
Far above any sort of baseline for talking about replacing him. And we talked about 2 weeks ago how Simeon Woods Richardson had kind of put himself in that position to be the person on watch in the rotation. And part of that is that they have 2 very good, already somewhat experienced in the majors, much higher upside young starters at AAA in David Festa, who we've seen make 3 starts already this season, including what he did last season, and Zebby Matthews, who we haven't seen yet in the majors this season, but we saw him down the stretch last year, and then we saw him in spring training. He was phenomenal.
Talk of spring training,
and he's got a 1-something ERA at AAA. They've both been very good at AAA. And so, there are maybe some years where they don't have any high-end young guys waiting in the wings at AAA, and Simeon Woods Richardson, who, by the way, is only 24, he might be their young guy that they like at that point.
Right.
And maybe they stick with him longer despite the recent struggles and him kind of running out of gas at the end of last season. But I think because they have Zebby Matthews thriving at AAA and they have David Festa, who not only is pitching well at AAA, but has pitched well in the majors this season and last season for them, it kind of raises the bar for what a starter, whether it's Paddock, whether it's Woods Richardson, whether it's whoever.
You've got a lot less leash.
Right. What you need to pitch like consistently, or flipping that around, how many non-good starts you can have consecutively before they go, well, what if we bump him for so-and-so?
Well, and Simeon Woods Richardson has had the crap kicked out of him, but he's also had trouble making it through 5 innings, etc. I mean, they've protected him clearly as they've been trying to.
People obsess about quick hooks and stuff with Baldelli. He's a prime example of them protecting a guy with quick hooks. I mean, we've seen Danny Coulomb come in twice in the last 3 starts to rescue him in the 5th inning.
Yeah,
both times with runners on base where he got out of it, and then we saw in Baltimore they handed him an early lead, and he just imploded. He gave up 2 homers and 6 runs in the 4th inning or whatever it was. Including a grand slam to Cedric Mullins, who just murders the Twins offensively and defensively.
And apparently with fly balls to center field that ended up taking out 2 of our players.
Oh, right. Was he the guy who hit it?
He was the guy who hit it.
Oh, wow. We might have to look into this. What did we ever do to him?
I don't know.
But with Simeon Woods Richardson, prior to this blow up against Baltimore, he had like a low 4-something ERA.
Yeah.
But he had now 3 starts in a row. We didn't complete 5 innings. Most of his starts this season have been 4 2/3. And it's not because they're giving him quick hooks. It's because he's getting in trouble second and third time through a lineup. and they're trying to prevent blow-ups by going to the bullpen early.
And a lot of times it's been, with 2 outs, he gets through 4.2 or something, and then suddenly single, we got to get him out of here. Yeah. And part of that is also like you don't get a lot of leash when your offense isn't scoring a lot of runs.
True, although he was handed a decent lead against Baltimore.
I know, that 4-0 lead was the one that
coughed it. I mean, it's not surprising to me that they made the decision after that because, he just basically imploded. He goes to he's demoted to AAA now with a 5.02 ERA. Secondary numbers are actually slightly worse than that because he's not striking out a ton of guys, which he didn't do that last year either. But he's also given up a lot more home runs than he gave up last year. And his control has taken a step backward too. He didn't have an amazing control last year, but he mostly was attacking hitters. I mean, that was one of the things they praised him for. And by the way, I don't want to take away from how much he saved their butt early last year.
Sure.
When DeSclafani goes down in spring training for the season and they turn to Louis Varland and he goes 0-4 with a 9-something ERA and they dumped Varland from the rotation, they turned to Simeon Woods Richardson, who had a good spring and had shown good signs in terms of mechanical changes he had made, but was certainly not expected to be a rotation stalwart last season.
Right.
And he had a 3.25 ERA roughly through his first 17 starts. We talked at that time, his advanced metrics suggest he is kind of pitching over his head a little bit, but that's fine. And he really, I thought, just, the luck kind of evened out for him, unfortunately, in July and August. And then in September, I felt like he was just on fumes. Like he got to 145, 150 innings, which is a career high. And if you look at his game log for September, I mean, he was barely getting through 2 or 3 innings in some of these starts. I think his last start of the season was 1 inning. So, I was actually a little surprised this spring that he didn't face any real competition for what ended up being the 5th spot in the rotation. It was pretty clear, I thought, from the start that was his job to lose. And he had an okay spring. He had it was fine. But Matthews had a phenomenal spring and yet still got option to the minors with 2 weeks left in camp. Right. Festa had a bad spring, but Festa had also pitched much better in the majors down the stretch than Woods Richardson. But there was never any indication, no matter what these guys do during spring training.
Even early in spring training, when I had people ask me or suggest to me, no, I'm not totally sure that Woods Richardson, I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure this spot is his to lose. Like he would have to do something
and he was
to shake up
training.
Yeah, to shake up everybody.
But that's different than okay, you begin the year in the 5th spot in the rotation. They put Paddock in the 4th spot, and then he had a couple of good starts this year. But again, it was clear from how they used him or how they managed him that they were trying to protect him as much as they could. And I think that speaks to his youth, but it also speaks to just the lack of confidence they had in his raw stuff and his ability to get out of some of these jams. And so when you have 3 starts in a row where you're getting knocked around in the 4th or the 5th inning, you're not getting through 5. Your ERA now is above 5. You're not given real length at all. You're 24. You're, in my opinion, at least, you plainly just have less upside than Matthews and or Festa, both of whom are pitching really well at AAA.
Yeah, pretty well, yep.
And I would say that the biggest thing to me was it seemed like Woods Richardson, in addition to just not being sharp, was trending in the wrong direction over the last 2 or 3 starts in terms of strike throwing. Like he seemed to be, I don't know if he was nibbling more, if he just kind of lost it mechanically a little bit.
Losing a little confidence.
Right. But a 5.02 ERA through 6 weeks of the season, there are versions of that even for a pitcher as young and inexperienced where you're like, actually, he's been okay.
Yeah,
he had a couple of bad starts, but
or if you've got a clicking offense or something like that,
right.
You're right. But
although I would say
in the 5th spot in the rotation,
I would say to do this during an 11 game, it was a 10 game when they made the decision, but a double-digit winning streak at a time when the rest of the rotation is thriving.
Yeah,
I weirdly give them credit for not just kind of resting on their laurels with this and saying, he's trending in the wrong direction, but everything else is going so well. Why change it? Whereas to me, it's like you have to evaluate him and that spot on its own, in my opinion.
I wonder how much of that, in general, I have felt like the organization has been a little bit more aggressive or proactive in making some of these roster moves than I am used to in the past. And I wonder how much of that is driven by the fact like that might be one of the nice outcomes of a starting the year with a losing streak or looking like you're in poor shape is that you end up being, you know what, we can't afford to screw around a lot here.
Yeah, although think about how we've talked about that. It's not that they're hesitant to demote young guys who are underperforming.
Well,
it's that they're hesitant to demote old
to
guys.
get rid of,
who
yeah,
are
unfortunately the veterans right now are
Right.
mostly doing pretty well.
Where Simeon Woods Richardson, I mean,
That's a fair point.
but yeah,
a fair point.
I mean, I think this is a lot about the idea that Simeon Woods Richardson has done well overall. He's exceeded expectations, certainly in the first half of last year.
Oh, for sure.
But I don't know that he, at this time last year even, was like more than penciled into their rotation. And so when some of these guys who have higher upside and are more prominent prospects and just throw harder and get more strikeouts and all that, when they're on the verge of being ready, and I would argue Festa's been ready for a while now,
Yeah.
and Matthews certainly is ready for another extended opportunity, he's blocking them. And that's not fair necessarily to Woods Richardson. It's not his fault that there are two better guys waiting in the wings at AAA. But from the team perspective, we talked a lot about this heading into the season. It's great to say you have tons of rotation depth. It's great to say we got 7 guys, we got 8 guys, the 5 in the opening day rotation, 2 or 3 at AAA we can count on. But if you don't actually make the correct choice over and over for the 5 that you're going to use at any given time, the depth doesn't help you any. And I think this is a pretty prime example of that, which is they absolutely could have kept rolling with Simeon Woods Richardson, tried to get him back on track, and in the meantime have a very quick hook with him and keep him out of damage and hope that, he gives up 4 runs and they can score 5 runs in a lot of games or whatever it is. But why do that? Like, if you don't think he's trending in the right direction and he wasn't at the top of your long-term view for the rotation and you have 2 guys both thriving at AAA, why not make the change? Like, what's the argument against making the change?
Right.
Unless you're just against making changes this early, which I guess is an argument too.
Sure.
But I think the fact that Woods Richardson struggled down the stretch last year it's not just a handful of shaky starts. You start to think, what is the real version of him? Because the truth is, when he was thriving in the first half of last year with a low 3 ERA, every discussion we have is, well, the numbers and his track record and the stuff. And
some of that was the numbers, and some of it was the track record of the expectations
Yes.
he came into the season with.
And
right?
so then when he struggles down the stretch, at the time, I think it was easy and even fair or just logical to say, look, he's thrown more innings than he ever has. He's 23 at that point. He wasn't expecting to be in the
I'd
rotation.
actually suggest that could be a factor this year as well in sort of what he's doing is just the number of innings that he threw last year and how late he tried to take a little extra rest this offseason, et cetera. But now we're into May.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, if that's a problem, then that's just part of your profile at that point.
Perhaps.
It's not like he threw 300 innings. He threw, I think, 140 something. But which isn't many more than Matthews threw last year or Festa threw last year. So I totally get why they're doing it. They haven't announced, like we talked about, they'll go with Funderburk for the next, yesterday and the next 2 games. They'll need a starter Sunday, and then it'll have to be more than a spot start because they don't have they do have an off day Thursday.
Yes, they do.
Which they could then use, I suppose.
Yeah.
But my assumption is that this is, and I could be wrong, like you asked about this. I don't know. I wasn't in Baltimore. They haven't really talked about it yet. But my assumption is this is more performance-based on both sides. Woods Richardson struggling and the 2 guys at AAA thriving.
Maybe.
Versus, hey, we just need a reliever.
Right.
But I do think we're definitely going to see Simeon Woods Richardson start more games for the Twins this season.
I did take a look the other day and say, when is Festa supposed to pitch again, and when is Ebby Matthews' last pitch?
Well, they're both fine to start Sunday. But the problem with Festa is he hasn't pitched since May 6th, so it's been now 10 days.
Okay.
Because he had some arm fatigue. So they haven't announced who will...
Ebby Matthews hasn't pitched since May 10th.
Well, he was scheduled to pitch either yesterday or the day before. But he's lined up. They haven't announced who it'll be, but it's going to be Matthews Sunday against Milwaukee. Now, I suppose if they wanted to be really tricky and use the off day and backfill the bullpen whenever they could have Matthews come up and start Sunday, send him down, call up Festa to make the start next weekend or whatever it is. Yeah. But I think my assumption is it'll just be Matthews holding the rotation spot for however long he looks good. Because I also think what is really gained from Woods Richardson's standpoint to just send him down for like a week and a half.
Right. Well, maybe.
Unless there's some very specific mechanical adjustment that you want to make. But I mean, he needs to reset and get on track and have some success.
Or just give him an extra rest or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So yeah, I think
also by play a little bit and see how long Ryan and Lopez, like you got two guys who can go pretty deep into a game on Saturday and Sunday, or Friday and Saturday. Maybe you feel like your bullpen's a little bit more set for Sunday. So I don't know.
Wow. I mean, Matthews ain't going to, unless he's terrible, he's not going to go fewer innings than Woods Richardson.
Well, no, I was wondering if they might do a bullpen game on Sunday. We'll see.
Oh. No,
it's
Matthews is starting
Matthews.
Sunday.
Okay, all right.
They haven't done a bullpen game in 3 years. They did the opener, but that was with Woods Richardson as the starter. I mean, for a team that constantly complains about not having enough relievers, they at least haven't done a bullpen game, which ensures you will not have enough relievers that day and the next day. So just a couple other things about this decision, which I get. I mean, look, we like Simeon Woods Richardson. He was a great guest at the Meltdown. He was awesome with fans. He's a really good dude to talk to.
Yeah.
I don't think this at all shuts the door on him being part of the rotation this season in future seasons.
Yeah, I agree.
I just think he needs to. He was pushed into that role last year way ahead of schedule. He hadn't actually had his sort of breakthrough. He had his breakthrough in the majors and then, turned back into a pumpkin a little bit at midnight. And that's carried into this season. But there's no reason he can't be a solid fourth or fifth starter for many years for the Twins or elsewhere. But they have higher upside guys. And think of it this way. You could go this year and the next 2 years with a starting five at some point of Lopez, Ryan, Ober, Matthews, Festa. You could get this season and the next 2 years where that's your starting five. Obviously, Woods Richardson out of the picture now, and then Paddock is an impending free agent, which I don't expect them to extend or anything. That's a really good group. Now, it's going to start to get expensive.
Pretty nice core, yep.
But that would be if one or both of Festa and Matthews live up to the potential. That's going to be one of the best rotations in the American League. I mean, for that matter, they already have one of the best rotations in the American League. But I mean, that is a thing you can build an entire team around. And for 2.5 seasons, which for pitching, that's all you want to kind of plan out. You don't need to be planning 6 years in advance for pitchers because they're all going to get hurt anyway. The value of having like a Simeon Woods Richardson as like a somewhat capable back end starter. Well, if you just have 5 number 2 or number 3 starters, what do you need a capable back-end starter for? So I think that was probably part of the equation, too.
And you probably still have a fair amount of depth sitting at AAA because you've got Morris sitting there right now. You've got Rice sitting down there. You've got guys coming up from AA that are working their way up.
Don't look at Marco Rice.
I have not. I fortunately did that the other day. That has not gone very well.
I was wondering why you were wearing the glasses they give you when they dilate your pupils for the eye test. John's been wearing those. But yeah, I mean, first of all, the whole premise that we're talking about now, long term, etc., depends on Matthews having success in his second time around.
Sure.
He did not. He got clobbered in 10 starts last September, August and September.
Yeah,
and now his stuff has risen even further since then. He looked dominant during spring training, and he's looked dominant for the most part at AAA. Although those last 2 or 3 have been a little less dominant. But the raw stuff is up. His secondary stuff is getting more swing and miss. He just looks like a more fully formed pitcher. But I also think what we saw from him last year was a guy who in the span of 2 or 3 months rose from high A to a pennant race as a major league starter. And similar to Simeon Woods Richardson, I think just kind of ran out of gas. Yeah. And where Woods Richardson's running out of gas manifested itself in like not being able to finish at bats and walking too many guys and high pitch counts and that in September. Zebby's just was bad location and giving up home runs.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, he needs to prove that isn't going to hold him back. But from a raw stuff standpoint, from a performance in the minors standpoint, this is a legit dude.
Yep.
So I'm excited to see him, whether it's 2 starts, 5 starts, 25 starts, who knows. And I'm also not against the idea of them using that 5th spot in the rotation, particularly when the top 4 veterans, including now Paddock, are pitching well, of using that 5th spot in the rotation of just, let's see who can be hot.
Pull up a new guy.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to stick with the guy for that long. I'm not saying 1 start to prove it, but I'm saying you give a guy 6 starts, and if he doesn't look good in 6 starts, go to the next guy. And if Woods Richardson doesn't look good, you send him down, you bring up now Matthews. If Matthews struggles, you send him down, you bring up Festa, and you hope that front four stays healthy. I just want to read the numbers. If you remove everyone's first start, which, like I said, it was a kind of a mess of a rotation.
Okay, that first week, right.
Yes. They've all made like 7 or 8 starts since then, basically. Here are the ERAs of the front four, the veteran four. Pablo Lopez, 265.
Okay.
And he didn't even have a bad first start. His first start was fine.
Well, he threw the ball around the infield.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying his defense was good. I'm saying his throwing to the
his
plate.
pitching was fine.
His throwing to the plate was good. His throwing to second base was
Second
horrendous.
base and first base were not so good. Yeah.
Joe Ryan, 285. He also had a good first start. I mean, he's been good the whole season. 285. Bailey Ober, 236. And he was coming back from a horrible first start.
Right.
Chris Paddock, like we talked about, had the worst start of anyone, has a 2.49 ERA in 7 starts since then. Yeah. When that is your front four, first of all, you can put together an 11-game winning streak, and you can go, 17-5 over the last 22, because you're getting such consistently strong starting pitching, and you're getting, for the most part, 6+ innings in a lot of these, which also can save the bullpen.
Yep.
And that can allow you then to treat the 5th spot as sort of its own proving ground in a way. Whereas if they were struggling,
it'd be interesting to see if they try to do that. We'll plug a few people in there and see what happens. If they stick around, they stick around. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, and also this is only necessary. Well, not only necessary, but their whole schedule got thrown out because you had the off day Monday, but then you had the Tuesday rain out followed by the Wednesday doubleheader.
Yeah.
Woods Richardson pitched poorly in the Wednesday doubleheader, which then I think caused them, like you said, to need some bullpen help in the short term, but also reevaluate the 5th spot in the rotation. There was one other thing. Well, just to go over, here are Simeon Woods Richardson's numbers since late July of last year. Basically, it's the second half of last year and then the beginning of this year. 5.51 ERA with 16 homers in 83 innings. And then the real worrisome part, 76 strikeouts and 37 walks in 83 innings, which is bad both ways, basically.
Yeah.
There just wasn't there wasn't that much to point to that you can say this is trending well for what is now, 15, 20 starts. So I get it. I'm still relatively optimistic about him. I would love to see him back and doing well. I would certainly take the over on him starting another game for the Twins this season. By far, they're going to need him.
Sure.
I mean, they're going to need depth. I don't really see them, or I don't really see him being like a convert to the bullpen candidate at this point. Because if you're calling up Zebby, you still have Festa as your AAA guy, but you're going to need more than one guy at AAA. And we just talked about Raya has struggled. Corey Lewis has struggled. Andrew Morris has been okay, but he's not been great at AAA so far. So the idea
He also just doesn't strike me as the type that converts to a bullpen really easily.
Right.
Maybe as always, we would rather see him try out the bullpen before you just give up on a guy, obviously, right? You never know exactly how it might play or might not. But he's sort of a guy that uses a lot of different pitches. He doesn't have a tremendous amount of velocity.
Right.
It's not clear that going out there and throwing as hard as he can for 3 innings would necessarily help him that much.
I will say he does throw a lot of pitches. His off-speed pitches are not good or have not been good. Yep. And so eliminating some of them to focus on one could potentially help. But
that's a good point.
I mean, he's already added velocity compared to a couple years ago. He's gotten back to where he was and a little bit more. He's throwing 93, 94, which it's funny. Like I'm so stuck in like the early 2000s when we both started doing this that it's still
93, 94 is fine.
Feels weird to me to be like, oh, he only throws 93, 94. The Twins would have killed. He would have been the hardest throwing guy on the staff, 20 years ago.
Right.
But Zebby Matthews is throwing 98, and David Fress is throwing 97. So there is definitely an upside or a long-term view component of this. And for that matter, taking Simeon Woods Richardson out of the equation completely, I just think Matthews and Festa are both deserving of a chance.
They certainly
here.
seem to have a ceiling of more of a top half of the rotation guy than a bottom half of the rotation guy, which is where
the focus with Woods Richardson is you got to get back to attacking the strike zone. He's averaging 3.5 walks per 9 innings for his career. You're just not going to be able to succeed when you're not a high strikeout guy to do that.
Yes.
Now it's possible they tweak some things and lean into this pitch over that pitch, and he can boost the strikeouts a little bit, but he hasn't really shown any ability to trend in that direction yet. And so, for him, the raw stuff is fine, but he really needs to throw more strikes more consistently. Second and third time through the lineup is going to be an issue for all young pitchers. It's an issue for him. And then, he ultimately, even if he's throwing a few more strikes, he's going to have to figure out a way to miss more bats than he has. Otherwise, he's just always going to be like kind of walking that fine line of fourth, fifth starter.
Raindrops.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're always going to be, you're an old school Twins pitcher type. You're pitching to contact. And again, he's averaging like 7 or 8 strikeouts per 9 innings, which once upon a time was a pretty high rate.
Right. Yeah.
The league
Rick
average
Anderson would have loved it.
Yeah. The league average is like a strikeout an inning now. So that's how you have to compare them. Before we go through our last bit of notes here, let's talk about our last couple sponsors. One of them is Hims Hair. I had your seats for the Wolves playoff game.
Okay.
The elimination game. I realize I've been in attendance at every home clinch playoff game in Wolves history.
Really?
I think there's only been 2. They went 20 years between it.
Did you were at the Sacramento Kings game? Oh, really?
I was 20 years ago.
I was too.
So I think that was the last one.
I didn't know if you were at that game.
But
okay.
The people sitting next to us, it was a kid and his dad. And we didn't say much to him. I complimented the kid, had a Jaden McDaniels jersey. I said, good choice on the jersey. And they were, cheering and everything fine. I get home and I tweet something about the game. And the dad replies to the tweet and he goes, I thought that was you, and shows me a video of myself. And you know what I first noticed in the video?
The hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't take a video of a bald guy.
It's hard not to be self-conscious about your hair if you've been losing some hair.
But Hims Hair,
yeah,
which is our sponsor right now, can potentially help you. There's a bunch of different options, whatever you're comfortable with.
That's right.
You can start a free online visit at hims.com/Gleeman, and you basically kind of answer some questions. You see the available options.
Right. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. They've got, personalized chewable, oral spray, serum treatments, whatever works best for you, they will end up figuring out. And it's just convenient. It's convenient access to a range of hair loss treatments. You don't know exactly which one you want? Well, that's what they're there for. They can help you out that. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/Gleeman. That's HIMS, hims.com/Gleeman for your personalized hair loss treatment options. Hims.com/Gleeman. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information.
Our final sponsor today,
Harry's.
Long-time sponsor.
I am impressed with Harry's because Harry's has figured out how to do the everyday thing. It is one thing to be everybody shaves. People shave, right? But you never know when that person that you want to is going to be close to your face. And the trick is making sure that your face is prepared every day. And that means it's not like, Thursday somebody might kiss me or
you can't schedule romance. I mean, you can, but
it's tricky, right? And what they have done is they managed to make it an everyday thing because there's no barriers to every day having a very close shave. The razor is there. It's not sitting in a store. It's going to be sharp because it's brand new.
Right. You don't have to wait until this thing's no longer even shaven yet because you don't want to go to a store and try to beg someone to unlock a case for you to get it.
It's been delivered to you. It's in a nice package. You don't have to worry about it costing too much. They've taken care of all of the barriers for you having a very close shave every day. And so...
you can get the trial set, which you can get for just $5. And here's what you get. You get the German engineered blades made in their factory that stay sharper longer, customizable delivery options, but this specific trial set comes with the 5-blade razor with a weighted handle. You get the foaming shave gel to use, and it comes in a nice case with a travel cover. We've both seen it. Yep. That's just $5. Get the edge on your shave with Harry's. Normally that trial set's $10, but right now you can get it for $5 at harrys.com/Gleeman. That's our exclusive link, HARRYS, harrys.com/Gleeman to get that $5 trial set.
You'd be prepared every day with
and the romance will follow.
Exactly.
That's not a guarantee, but
but you don't want to penalize that person if the romance does follow with having a scratch paper face.
You don't want, when that one day a year comes up, you don't want to be unprepared.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, let's finish talking about a few other random things. But the nice thing we've seen, other than first week of the season, the rotation has consistently been the strength, not only of the team, but one of the biggest strengths in the league. It has carried them when they had bad offense. It has carried them when the bullpen was blowing up for a couple weeks there. And now that the offense has shown a little life and the bullpen has gotten on track, it has carried them to an even larger extent. We just read the low ERAs that they have. This is the foundation of this team, and it's reason, much like 2023, which I keep drawing the comparisons, to have faith not only for a regular season, but potentially a playoff. Because we just talked about, Twins teams have reached the playoffs in the past, and God love them, they've put Brandy Dobnik and Brian Dunsing and who else out there to start playoff games, and you're just at such a disadvantage. And sometimes that's because of injuries, but sometimes it's just because they didn't have high-end starting pitching most of the time. We saw in 2023, Pablo Lopez at the top of the rotation is capable of doing some things.
Right.
Sonny Gray didn't come through as much as they wanted in 2023, but is certainly capable of doing so.
For sure.
The difference in 2023 is that they had faith in both of those guys, and they were right about Lopez and not quite 100% right about Gray, but they didn't. By the end of the season, they felt like Ober and Ryan were too shaky to just let have a full 5+ inning start. So they kind of tried to play games with them. They put him in first time through the lineup, then they went to the bullpen, and all that backfired. It probably would have gone bad either way. But the difference this year, you still have Pablo Lopez pitching very, very well.
Yep.
You no longer have Sonny Gray, but both Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober, in my mind at least, have taken steps forward.
It was clear midway through last year that they had. It was one of the things we were watching for last year to see after the playoff run in 2023. Then one of the big questions we had is after losing Sonny Gray, could they develop a number 2 and number 3 guy for the for the postseason? And what we saw was both of those guys kind of get to that point. Now, we still got to see Joe Ryan make it all the way through the season healthy.
Just from a performance standpoint, they have 3 of the top, 15, 20 starters in the American League for sure. And then, I think one of the reasons why you would be incentivized to make a change with Woods Richardson sooner than later is because you want to give Matthews an opportunity to get a footing and establish himself and maybe work his way into that same sort of viewpoint of this guy could be a playoff starter. And if not, you want to give Festa an opportunity to do that too. And for that matter, Paddock, I guess, at this point. Right. And so, look, we're a long way from that. You got to keep winning. You got to stay healthy. You got to not run out of gas like starting pitchers will often do. But, this is the performance from this starting rotation is great, somewhat sustainable in my mind, and matches the narrative coming into the season, which that was one of my big predictions. It's probably the only one that's been right so far that I've made about this team, which is that, everybody wants to talk about if the lineup will bounce back and all the young hitters, and everybody wants to talk about all the great bullpen projections. Yeah. I thought the rotation was going to determine this season. And the fact that it kept them afloat when the rest of the team was struggling so much, and now that the rest of the team is starting to get their act together a little bit and the rotation is thriving even more, to me is such a positive of these first 40-something games. You got to sustain it. You got to have health, and that's always tricky with starting pitching. But the starting pitching has just been phenomenal. And the fact that they began the season by allowing, 25 runs in the first turn, and they still have, their top 3 in basically every category for a rotation. I just think.
Well, it's the we expected it to be the base for a 85, 86 win team, right? Through the first 3 weeks, after that first week, we looked at it and said, the truth is the rotation is performing about what we kind of expected. For now we just need to get, not dismal hitting.
Right.
And they were getting dismal hitting. The other thing that has changed, and I think maybe the biggest or a huge factor in this 11-game winning streak certainly, is the performance of the bullpen, which was putting up good overall numbers. And from up and down the line, I was sort of like, I have a fair amount of confidence in this guy. I have a fair amount of confidence. But then they're coughing up leads. Now, part of the reason they're coughing up leads is they've got no room for error, right? No room for error whatsoever. And in fact, they actually haven't had a lot of room for error during this 11-game winning streak.
Right. This lineup is not good enough, particularly if some of these guys are just going to stay hurt.
Right.
It's not 2019. 2019, they were up 8-2 in the fourth inning, and you could plan your bullpen out and you could manage that way and everything.
Right.
But, I mean, that's one of the things that made the Woods Richardson start in Baltimore so frustrating, is because 4 runs is not a lot, but it's a lot for this team this season to be handed, and then to blow that lead really hurts. And I think just having
and you still can't help but question whether or not the lineup's going to make up and score 2-3 runs on the end of it. Right?
But I mean, they're averaging during the win streak, they're averaging basically 5 runs a game, and believe me, I would sign up for that absolutely. Sure, especially offense is down across baseball this year in the early going. But there's a big difference from a bullpen standpoint of even the difference between a tie game, a 1-run lead, and a 2-run lead.
Right.
Like if you have a 3-1 lead after 6 innings, it's such a different situation than a 2-1 lead or a 1-1 game after 6. And I know that's obvious, but what I mean is we've seen like with Jax or with Brock Stewart or some other guys, like if you put pitchers in a position where one bad pitch can tie the game or lose the game, people are going to have one bad pitch. I mean, like great relievers are going to have one bad pitch. But if you put that same reliever in a situation where one bad pitch cuts the deficit from 2 to 1 or from 3 to 2, you can just pitch with a lot more freedom and you can attack hitters and you don't have to worry about one meatball, like let's say in Louis Varland's case. And he's otherwise been so good. And so I think even having a somewhat capable offense, which they have over the last couple weeks now, even though the overall numbers are bad, and even though I'm worried if you lose Correa and Buxton and Bader or some combo, maybe we go back to the bad days of offense. So we'll see. But even getting 3, 4, 5 runs, it's not an offensive explosion, but it at least allows you to not waste the good starts, and it at least allows you to give the bullpen a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of I can make a bad pitch once every 3 outings and not ruin the game. Because, to your point, the bullpen's overall numbers, and by that we mean like ERA, strikeout rate, FIP, expected ERA, all that stuff, has basically been good throughout this season. But the difference was, if they're going to allow 3 runs in a series, that's good. But if all 3 of those runs are allowed in the 8th inning of a tie game, you're going to lose those games. And so from a WPA win probability standpoint, which puts it in the context of the game state, they were getting crushed. They were among the worst in baseball because, like we saw with Griffin Jax kept running into these...
And still are seeing Griffin Jax a little bit.
Yeah, although he's been pretty damn good.
He's been very good, right. Just still giving up the weird hits at bad times.
Well, that was 1 run, basically. And he got out of that, and they had breathing room. That's I think, a prime example of kind of what we're talking about here. Right. He had that game, ball goes off him. Yeah. Instead of being a double play, he allows the 1 run, but he gets out of that jam, and they had enough offensive breathing room in that game to move forward and not have it wreck the entire thing. And so it's not that the bullpen... I agree with that. What you said, like it's not that the bullpen has gotten that much better. It's that their rare bad moments have ceased being in the clutchest, high leverage-ish spots. Right. And I don't know that that's predictive or sustainable, but
I think it's more predictive and sustainable than what we saw before, which is that the rare bad moments are happening in exactly the wrong spots.
Although this is like 3 years in a row where that's the case for the bullpen, where their overall numbers...
Baseball gods would probably disagree with me, I
mean, hell, that was the case for like Emilio Pagan's entire Twins career.
True. You are correct.
You look at the overall numbers and you go, this guy's been pretty good, and you look at the actual... effect on winning and losing, and you're like, I never want to see this guy get in my life. Right. And on a smaller scale, they've had that bullpen wide for 2 or 3 years now. So that's been in this Baltimore series, the bullpen came up huge.
Yeah, no, I know that's what I'm saying.
They were basically.
I think they have thrown like something like. I don't think they gave up a run in the bullpen gave up a run to the Orioles.
Yeah, you might be right. About 14 innings.
And I'm talking over both series.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean, they are absolutely fantastic.
And the interesting thing about the bullpen to me right now is you're right. It's good. It's deep. Baldelli talked on last homestand about like there aren't that many buttons to push in the bullpen that aren't good buttons. Right. Like it almost doesn't matter the situation. Like obviously they're not going to turn to Alcala in a key game, but they have 4 or 5 guys they trust at all times, and that helps just for quality. But it also helps when you get 6 good innings, let's say, from your starter, and you're up 3-1 going into the 7th. Well, their approach right now has been Varland for an inning, Jax for an inning, Duran for an inning. And that's worked brilliantly for the most part over the last several weeks. But then the problem is what if the same situation pops up the next day? Well, you can maybe use those guys, but then what if it pops up for a third game in a row? And that's a nice problem to have, by the way. You want to be using your best relievers because it means you have late leads, and they've gotten such good starting pitching that they've often had that over this winning streak. But to have 4 or 5 guys or 6 guys you trust is so much different than having like 3 or 4 because it means when the A, B, and C guys have pitched 2 out of 3 or back-to-back or 4 out of 5, that your D, E, and F guys are still Cole Sands, Brock Stewart, Justin Tope has been pretty decent. Yeah. I mean, basically everybody, but Alcala has been pretty decent. Sorry.
And even he was pretty good the other day.
Well, yeah, multi-inning.
Couple innings, yeah.
The emergence of Varland has been big.
Yep.
And
Danny Coulombe has been amazing.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Coulombe. I was thinking of all the righties. Coulombe's been, he has a 0 ERA. He's rescued Simeon Woods Richardson twice.
Got the second highest WPA on the staff.
Yes. And he's a great example of, because he's basically been used in the 5th, 6th, and 7th innings.
Right.
He's closed out 2 games, but other than that, he's not been used as a setup man unless it's the circumstance that I just talked about where the A, B, and C guys are out of it. Yeah. But his kind of primary function has been to rescue a starter with like 2 on and 2 outs in the 5th or the 6th inning. Or
usually versus a left-handed hitter.
Or to be spotted, facing the middle of an order where there's 2 lefties out of the next 3 or 4 batters. And he's been phenomenal in that role. And he's a good example of everyone gets so obsessed about 9th inning, 8th inning. When Jax was struggling, people were like, why don't you pitch him in the 7th inning and put Varland in the 8th inning? As if that really matters. Coulombe is a prime example of, and we used to see that with like Theobar would do this a lot, who he's essentially replacing as the lefty. You can have huge leverage, game-changing opportunities in the 5th, 6th, and 7th inning if you're coming into tight games or you're trying to rescue guys and put out fires. And a lot of times, if you don't do the job in those spots, there's no game to save.
Right.
And everyone gets obsessed about closer and setup and 8th and 9th, but they found a real way to deploy him. And I think it fits his strength in the sense that he's not going to be a high workload guy. He's not going to give you 80 innings. I mean, he's 5'5" and he has a history of arm problems and he doesn't throw hard. And so I think they figured out a way sometimes to deploy him for only 1 or 2 batters. But so far, he's been a guy who can pitch often, but not a lot. And what I mean by that is he can pitch 3 out of 4, but he maybe only faces 1 or 2 guys in a couple of those games. And so they found like the highest leverage points to deploy him, like you said, often against lefties. Whereas there are some guys like Louis Varland who is pitching often and a lot.
Right.
Whereas Coulombe is they're picking their spots with him because they'd rather him be available many times for 2 outs than occasionally for like 5 or 6 outs.
Well, and one of the key places that he's being used is a place where I hadn't really thought about this before I went to, so on the rain day, the doubleheader day. What was that? Wednesday, right? Wednesday, there was also a doubleheader in Philadelphia, so we went caught the Phillies game on our last day there, and of course I got to see Max Kepler play. Right, Max Kepler's in the lineup because there's a right-hand. That Phillies, by the way, also have faced very few left-handed pitchers this year, similar to the Twins, and there was a situation there where they ended up talking about it a little bit on the radio as well, and I wanted to run it past you because I think this is why Coulombe ends up with such a huge spot if he's in the 6th inning that he wouldn't necessarily have if he wasn't a right-handed hitter, which was, I think the Phils were down 1-0. They had runners on 1st and 3rd, 1 out, something like that. And Max Kepler strolls to the plate. Well, they make the move. They bring in a left-handed pitcher to face Max Kepler. And the Phillies let Kepler bat. Okay, now they have Weston Wilson on the bench, who's a right-handed hitter, and he's pretty good. And Kepler strikes out. and so I think the game remains 1-1 or something like that. Next inning, Phils have a similar situation. Chance to score, have a left-handed hitter coming up, Brandon Marsh, to hit. They still got that left-hander on the mound, and this time they pinch hit Weston Wilson for it. And, the question was sort of like, why would you pinch hit for Marsh versus Kepler here? Now, it could just be because you think Kepler's going to be better versus left-handed hitters.
Because it's later in the game.
Marsh, right? But the difference is it's one inning later in the game.
Yeah. So the odds of that spot coming up in the order again and then being stuck with that righty against a righty reliever are much lower.
Yeah, exactly.
And we saw the Twins try to counteract this last year and the year before, which drove people nuts, where you
end up pulling Julian out in the 6th inning.
They'd have third inning. Kirilloff and Julian and Larnach and Wallner and Kepler, for that matter, and I'm missing a couple lefties probably too. They had so many left-handed hitters, and they'd stack them against a right-handed starting pitcher, and then sometimes get to that right-handed starting pitcher. Right. Sometimes that pitcher would just be on a short leash, and it'd be the 4th inning or the 5th inning, and the opposing manager would bring in a lefty, and that lefty would be licking their chops because they'd see 3 out of the next 4 batters are Julian and Larnach and whoever. Right. And what Baldelli had to decide then was the exact scenario that you're painting. Like, is this too early to make this move?
That's right.
But he very often last year
was making the move
early. Now
and then his right-handed hitting, poor right-handed hitting person might come up in the 9th versus their closer.
Then you have Kyle Farmer taking 2 at-bats late against a righty.
Right.
The hope was you can break the game open by pinch hitting early.
Right.
But unfortunately, when the pinch hitters were like Manuel Margot and he goes 0 for 30, you didn't really break those games open as much as you would hope. And then you're stuck with bad matchups for the rest of the game because you don't have anybody left on the bench.
But from the pitching team side, you understand then why it's so valuable to have a left-handed pitcher. It's not just so that he might be able to, especially now that you have to face 3 batters in a high leverage situation, the 8th inning or something like that. That is maybe not where you want to use a left-handed pitcher, because they will pinch hit for somebody in the 8th inning.
Well, there's a reason you don't see that many left-handed closers other than the truly elite of the elite. Because in the 8th or 9th inning, like you're saying, if a lefty is on the mound, they're almost never going to face left-handed hitters unless it's like Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani level guys, or Yordan Alvarez. Because whatever moves the manager has to make in terms of pinch hitters, they will make it in the 9th inning against the closer. Whereas, as you're pointing out, in the 5th or the 6th inning with Danny Coulombe, you really put a situation. And I also think people probably underrate how good Danny Coulombe has been at this point of his career.
You're right.
Because he doesn't look like much and he doesn't throw that hard.
Well, he'll often come in the 5th inning to bail out, Simeon Woods Richardson, say, or something like that, and stick around and pitch the 6th as well. Like he's got a couple.
That's been pretty rare. I don't think he's done that hardly at all. Actually, my whole point, like 3 minutes ago, was that they haven't.
I think he has, though. Okay, well, check his game log. I thought had a couple of.
They basically
1.1.
I mean, might have a couple. They don't do that with anybody at this point. I mean, that's one of the remaining criticisms that people still send us is like they're so focused not on the batters faced or the pitch count, but on the ups, which has become the way that you describe basically sitting there for an inning and going back out. It is funny how the same concepts get kind of rebranded every decade in baseball, which, like, I remember in Little League, if you had a big inning offensively and you scored 8 runs, sometimes the starting pitcher wouldn't come out because he was sitting there for 25 minutes. And that used to just be like, you kind of cool them off or you ice the pitcher.
Right.
And now it's like, well, the number of ups are really important. The number of times that a guy goes out there, and Paddock talked about that in his last start when he went into the 8th. He basically said it's not the pitches. And it's not the, hard pitches and battles and all that. It's sitting there 7 times while they hit and then going back out because you tighten up, you cool down, you lose adrenaline, and then you just go right back out there. So you're looking up Danny Coulombe's numbers. Go ahead.
Twice he's done it.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
I mean, they very intentionally.
Once was last week, so that's why I was remembering it.
They very intentionally don't do that with him. But yeah, the bullpen, I would say at this point, sort of, we'll end on this, I guess, where things are kind of trending. The rotation has been good throughout, but is really rolling now. And the hope, obviously, is that it even has a little bit more capability of rolling further if you replace the one guy who wasn't pitching well, Woods Richardson, with Zebby Matthews or eventually Festa, whatever. We'll see. I mean, they gotta actually perform. The bullpen has been pretty good throughout, like we said, overall, but has now gotten to a point where their rare struggles are not occurring in the worst possible times.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that that's That might just be random, honestly.
Right. Well, I think it is.
So I don't know
but I would suggest that it was unlucky before,
Sure.
whereas it's evening out now.
And then from an offensive standpoint, I still have a lot of worry about just the number of capable major league hitters that they're trotting out or not trotting out
Right.
on a daily basis, particularly if we get bad news tonight on Buxton, Correa, Bader, etc. I mean, and I'm not trying to like crap on these guys.
Sure.
Cody Clemens has had some really good moments.
Yep.
Jonah Bride has looked okay at the plate.
Fine.
There's been some.
Perks Lee has absolutely been.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, they've gotten okay production, but Kersey lately has had some moments. But if you look at this lineup, and it's like they have a lot of guys who you wouldn't mind being the 9th place hitter in a lineup, but when there's 4 of them in the same lineup, and when you have like Christian Vasquez also hitting, although he came up through with a big home run during the Orioles series, they just need more major league caliber hitters, like just proven entities.
Listen, if you've got out Wallner and Correa, and Buxton, and Keishel, and I mean,
and Miranda took a step backward, and Julian didn't step up. And,
I mean,
you're running out of.
You could expect to be in the bottom third of the American League in offensive production. That's just the way that's going to be.
The fact that they've scored basically 5 runs per game during this 11-game winning streak, it hasn't always been pretty, but they've had some multi-run homers. Yeah. Vasquez hits a 3-run homer. Clemens hits a 3-run homer. They pick in a hell of a time to do this.
Kersey hits a homer.
Kersey hits the back-to-back homers with Buxton. Yeah. That's sometimes all you need if you have a really good pitching staff. Yeah. And fortunately, I think this pitching staff has rounded into the form that a lot of people expected and that got kind of scoffed at early in the season when rotation was not good right away. And then the bullpen kept blowing leads. I mean, how many different tweets and comments and mailbags did we? I thought this was supposed to be the best bullpen in baseball.
Just so we're clear, that's right. Yeah. They were right. The tweets and comments are right. Yeah,
sure.
We did too.
But I think they're at a point offensively where you can say that's the type of, if this team is going to be good and not just have a 1 winning streak and then fall apart or whatever it is. If this team is going to make a playoff run like 2023, I think the equation is going to be very similar to 2023 and maybe even more like stratified than 2023. Because the one thing that pushed them over the top in 2023 was the rotation was good throughout. The bullpen kind of got its act together in the second half after dealing with some shaky moments.
But the offense came alive
over the last
2 months.
6 weeks really kicked it into gear in part because Julian, Wallner, and Royce Lewis were added and carried a lot of them. Yeah. Maybe there's an Emmanuel Rodriguez.
And Kepler got hot as hell, as I recall.
Yes, he was like that. But, maybe this year in the second half, we see Keishel come back. We see Wallner come back. Right. We see Emmanuel Rodriguez get a chance.
Royce Lewis warms up again.
There's an opportunity for that. But there's also an opportunity if some of these injuries linger or some of these Julian Miranda types don't step up for this just to not be that good of an offense, in which case you need your pitching staff to be even better. I think this pitching staff is capable of being even better. Like, I really think this, and look, this is crazy to say given how pitching goes with injuries.
There's some regression to the mean here at some point. Like,
I just think their mean is pretty good. I think the fact that they have Festa and Matthews waiting in the wings helps. Mm-hmm. I think that, by midseason, you might have a Connor Prelip to help. You might have some other relief options to help, or maybe you convert one of those Zebbies in the bullpen in the second half or something like that. I just think this has a chance to be, in terms of what they've done so far, but just in terms of the overall talent and depth, rotation and bullpen, this really has a chance to be like one of the better top to bottom pitching staffs in the history of the Twins. And it's easy to say when they're on a stretch where they got a 2-something ERA over 3 weeks or whatever. But that
11-game win streak.
That was my expectation for the rotation coming in. That was how the bullpen kind of projected coming in, even though we were a little skeptical of that, obviously. And it's fortunate because if the offense doesn't answer the questions that we have right now, that's what they're going to need to win 90 games and make a playoff
or just to keep from falling apart. Right. If they run into a tough 3-week stretch, maybe they go, 8-12 versus.
It would also help if the rest of the division stopped winning. That would also help. Even the White Sox are winning since they got that Pope in place.
That next homestand.
Since they got God on their side. The godless White Sox.
That's right. Yeah.
They got what's his name? Pope.
Who would have thought of all the places? Pope Leo.
Pope Leo, the White Sox fan.
That's right.
God. They've won like 5 out of their last, I don't know, way more than you would expect. So maybe that's all it took. Can you imagine? That's going to be a hell of a World Series DVD. Coming off the worst season ever. They were off to a horrible start, and then Pope Leo, and they went on a run.
Choir of angels start singing. Yeah. All right. We're going to be back Monday with a Patreon. We actually, last Patreon, we ended up finishing it with a discussion of baseball terms that have made it into everyday life. We're not going to actually play any clips because this has already gone way too long. But you can get a clip by just signing up for the Patreon and checking it out. And you'll be able to get all of the back episodes, etc.
For April, we did 12 Patreon episodes, including some basketball talk.
Right.
We're on pace for like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Barring some more basketball talk for this month.
Yeah, we'll probably also be doing some Wolves stuff. I would like to sit and talk with Wolves with you.
We got a little time. That's a nice thing. They don't play till Tuesday, so we could talk a little.
You
Wolves
are
too.
Correct. Yeah. So
Patreon.com. Patreon.
$8 a month. We used to be $1 an episode. Now it's just $8 a month.
Which ends up being like 60 cents an episode, which really speaks to how bad we are at business. We've slashed prices when the demand is high. I don't know why we did that, but we did that. So Patreon.com/Gleeman, and if not, we'll talk to you next Friday.
Gleeman